Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Thing You Hate Talking About. Today, we're going to talk about another ideology, an overall arching ideology, that with many names and definitions, which is socialism. Now, hold on, everybody, back away. I know I just said the S word, but I can promise you, socialism isn't entirely what you think it might be. Now, before I go any further, I am going to make this disclaimer that this is not going to be a comprehensive video on socialism. Socialism has a lot of different theory and thought and different definitions and workarounds, and it's very difficult to try to encapsulate that all into a 10 to 20 minute video to try to get all of that thought into one 10 to 20 minute video, which is, very difficult. So bear that in mind. So if you are somebody who leans more towards the left, please note I am just going over very bare bones and trying to make it as simple as I possibly can. So with that said, here we have the typical hammer and sickle symbol, most associated with the Soviet Union. Here is the Socialist Party USA logo. So they're a political party in the United States. And then this is the symbol of anarchism, which is the circle with the eighth in it. So now, what is socialism? Well, like I said, socialism has so much thought around it that it's really hard to make one singular definition, but I'm going to try to make one unifying definition that virtually all forms of socialism would agree upon in some way. So, socialism is when the workers of society collectively have control over the economic process. So that means they control what's produced, they control how it's produced, and they make those decisions as a collective. Now, this process can be centralized or decentralized. So what's the state got to do with it? So for a socialist, the state is the political entity, the nation, or a country, the government. And so how society goes about implementing socialism depends. Do you want it in a more centralized fashion? Do you want the state to be heavily involved, or do you want the state to not be heavily involved in a more decentralized fashion? And how do we get to socialism? So reform or revolution, how do we get there? Do we get there through evolutionary means, or do we get there through revolutionary means, whether that be a violent overthrow of the current system or through massive direct action with numerous people pushing for socialist ideas? And how do we implement it once we have it? Do we use market-based strategies, or do we use non-market-based strategies? So there's a lot of different questions that are answered, and different types of socialism have different answers. Speaking of which, there are numerous types of socialism. So I'm just going to click on this link here because it would be very difficult for me to go about it. Right here, towards the center of the page, I'm not going to scroll through the whole thing, but here are all the different forms of socialism that Wikipedia has written down. Okay, so you've got utopian socialism, and you've got communism and Marxism and Marxist-Leninism and Stalinism, Maoism, Trotskyism, council communism and left communism, autonomism, and then the anarchist schools. You've got mutualism, collective anarchism, anarcho-communism, anarcho-syndicalism, individualist anarchism, and democratic socialism and social democracy, eco-socialism, green anarchism, liberal socialism, ethical socialism, libertarian socialism, the different regional socialisms and the different religious socialisms and syndicalism. And they all have slightly different ways of how they would get about a socialist society. They are very interesting, and it's a lot to go through. So that's why it would be very difficult to try to explain all of it in one sitting. But I highly encourage you, when this video is over, to go and look at more of what socialism entails, or different types of socialism. And I'll get to different socialist thinkers here in a second to help you kind of jump off from there. But to go over these pictures that we have here, this symbol is a fist and a rose, and this is democratic socialist symbol. The red and black flag is associated with anarcho-communism, and then this flag is the Soviet Union flag. So now, some famous socialist thinkers. Now, these are some of the people that have laid the groundwork for a lot of thought today and are still quoted to this day and thought of to this day. So here we have Pierre Joseph Proudhon, right here, this one. And he was a French anarchist who had very interesting ideas on property and had different things. So some of his works were property, or one of the things that he said was property is theft. And you can look up how that is and what that's like. And then you have Mikhail Bakunin, sorry, not Buchanan, Bakunin. My apologies. Mikhail Bakunin was an anarchist who was a follower of Proudhon's, and he butt heads a lot with Karl Marx here. Bakunin really pushed for an anarchist society, and he's seen as one of the founders of more modern anarchist thought. And Karl Marx, many people know Karl Marx for being the one to quote unquote start socialism, and he started more centralized socialism, you could say, and he wrote numerous works. The Communist Manifesto, the volumes of Das Kapital, those are full of economic theory. Friedrich Engels was a follower and acquaintance and associate of Karl Marx's, and he ended up actually publishing the third volume of Das Kapital after Marx's death, and he wrote Scientific Socialism, so on how Karl Marx's Marxism was a scientific process. So there's that. And then we have Rosa Luxemburg down here, and she was a Marxist who tried to have a socialist revolution in Germany at the end of World War I. However, it failed, and she was ultimately executed by the government at the time. Vladimir Lenin was a Russian Marxist, or the leader of the Bolsheviks in Russia, and he ended up leading the Bolsheviks to win the Civil War and start the Soviet Union. And he was the first leader of the Soviet Union, but he wrote a lot about other Marxist theory as well. And then Mao Zedong was the first leader of the People's Republic of China, which is what we know today. And he also wrote a lot on different things about socialism. So those are some thinkers who have influenced a lot of what we know today. And there's probably some of the biggest thinkers that have influenced a lot of what we know today. There are a ton more. I haven't gone through all of them, nearly all of them. But now, since I'm an American, I'm going to go on and to show my friends and comrades and other people who live in America that socialism isn't just a European thing. It's also been here in the United States. So I've broken it down into famous Americans who were socialists from when socialism kind of started to the 1950s. So that's this first slide here. And then I do from the 1960s to today. So first off, we have Emma Goldman. Emma Goldman was an anarchist, and she had some very interesting thoughts on anarchism and was a big thinker and writer about anarchism and just in general. And then we have Eugene V. Debs. Eugene Debs was the Socialist Party candidate for many years during their 1910s and 1920s. And he actually, in one of the years, he ran for president again, but he won 1 million votes while he was in prison for speaking out against World War I, which was quite impressive. But on top of that, he was a big advocate for unions and pushing socialist thought, like an 8-hour workday and, weekends off and stuff like that. Now we have Dorothy Day. Dorothy Day was another American socialist anarchist who started the Catholic workers movement in the 1930s to try to help push the Catholic social teaching and for workers and for better living life for people. And then we have Helen Keller. So if we go down, we have Helen Keller. Many people know her for being a deafblind woman who learned how to sign thanks to her teacher, but many people don't know that she was also a socialist. She helped start the ACLU. She was very much for socialist ideas. And then we have W.E.B. Du Bois, who pushed for African liberation in the United States through a socialist mechanism. He is very influential in the liberation of African Americans in the United States. And then we have Francis Bellamy. Francis Bellamy was a Christian socialist in the 1890s, and he actually wrote the first version of the Pledge of Allegiance. So we can credit Francis Bellamy for the Pledge of Allegiance today. Now we have Earl Browder. Earl Browder was the Communist Party of the U.S.'s chairman during World War II. So in the 1930s and the early 1940s. And he followed, like many communist parties at the time, they followed the Soviet line. And so he was the one to really follow the Soviet line there. And then here we have one of my favorite folk singers of all time, Woody Guthrie. And Woody Guthrie was a socialist, and he was very much an anti-fascist. He was against, on his guitar, he has the sticker, "This machine kills fascists." He was very influential in his music, and he actually wrote the song "This Land Is Your Land." And he wrote many other songs, as I stated in my video about anti-fascism. But yeah, he is there to show that the American country persona and folk music scene was heavily leftist for a very long time. But those are from then, and now we can move on to today. And here we have socialists from the 1960s to the present day. So first off, we have Bernie Sanders. And of course, many people know Bernie Sanders because he ran in 2016 and most recently in 2020 on a very social democratic platform. And he ended up not getting the nomination for the Democratic Party, but he has continued to push his ideas that he was running for during his campaign. Now, over here we have Noam Chomsky, and Noam Chomsky is seen as one of the fathers of modern linguistics, but he's also a huge political dissident, and he believes in libertarian socialism, and he wrote the book along with somebody else, Manufacturing Consent, about how the media manipulates the reader in order to understand what the media wants to understand. And then over here we have Murray Bookchin, and Murray Bookchin was an American anarchist who wrote a lot of different works that ended up going across the world to being implemented after being written or being worked upon by a Turkish Kurd by the name of Abdullah Öcalan. I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, but he took some of Murray Bookchin's thought and made it into what is known as democratic confederalism that is being currently implemented at the time of this recording in northern Syria in the area of Rojava by the Kurds and those who live in that area there. Then we have down here Angela Davis. Angela Davis is an American socialist and American communist who was very active in the 60s, and she continues to be very active in liberation of people today. You can find all of her or many of her lectures on YouTube, and you can just listen to her, and she is a very interesting and a smart person to listen to, and her ideas about liberation and prisons and all this other stuff are really interesting to listen to. Now here we have Howie Hawkins, and Howie Hawkins, for those of you who don't know, is the Green Party's 2020 presidential candidate, and along with the Green Party, the Socialist Party USA, so the logo that I showed earlier in the video, he is their combined presidential candidate, and his vice president is Angela Walker, and they have a program that is very much like Bernie Sanders was, but it goes further than Bernie Sanders's did. So in some regards, some are the same, but some are different as well. And now here we have Professor Richard Wolff, and Dr. Wolff is a Marxist economist, and he has talked a lot about socialism and what it is, and he has written books on understanding socialism and understanding communism, and he does a YouTube channel and show called Economic Update, and you can find that at the channel Democracy at Work if you are interested in watching more of what Dr. Wolff has to say. But yeah, so these are some of the people who are present day or around this time American socialists. So I hope that this helped you to kind of branch you off on a path to find out more information, because a lot of these people are really interesting to listen to. And if you don't want to listen to certain people at all, that's fine. You can go on to other people that you might agree with more. I hope this has opened your eyes a little bit or has helped you to go down a path of exploration and study. So I thank you all for watching this video and for listening. I greatly appreciate it, and I hope everyone is staying happy and healthy during this time. And solidarity, everyone.